Hello everyone, it's Christine here. I hope you're well. I hope you're having a creative, wonderful day. And I'm back to finish work on my slow stitch hexagon bowl for Roxy's Journal of Stitchery. It's inspired by Snugglepot and Cuddlepie, as was my little pentagon bowl that I made first. That is the perfect thing for holding these little quilt clips, and it's using a similar method for the actual hexagons, although rather than doing a ladder stitch around them, I'm doing blanket stitch, but I'll show you all that shortly. And it's a design that I came up with using my Epiflex hexagon plastic templates to come up with a design that can have a square base, and I'm planning to just sit it on one of the hexagons, almost, well, not sit it, to actually stitch it onto one of the hexagons, almost like a little saucer under the bowl. And it is made up of 12 hexagons, although I've made double-sided hexagons so I can sew them together. So I made them by cutting out a piece of felt using my Epiflex template and then cutting out the fabric larger than that. I kind of fussy cut them out so I got the pictures where I wanted them, and then using some Yoo-hoo glue, folding over the edges, ironing it down to get it to sit flat, and then next step will be sewing this together using blanket stitch. On this one I actually used the ladder stitch just to get the sort of more invisible edges, but I wanted to do something different, and I kind of like, because it reminds me a bit of little leaves or little branches or something sticking down there. So in the previous episode we were doing some embellishment on some of the pieces, and I'm planning to use these embellished pieces spread around the top, so 4 stitched into embellished pieces, separated then by some of the little downward pointing pieces. So I've divided each of these so I know where they're going to be used on the bowl when we come to put it together. But let me just show you where I got up to with the embellishing. So I just love how these have turned out. I've done stitching around the leaves here, and also some beautiful stitching into the butterfly wings, just with I think it was actually a very fine crochet cotton that I had, and it just worked out beautifully. I love how sort of luminous it is. And then did the little caps. It was a variegated wool, so I was able to use the same wool but get 2 different sort of colours out of it. And I did a split stitch to outline, and then did some longer stitches, long short stitches over that. So I think that's worked out really beautifully. And then I think we were doing this together last time, the wattle, and I just continued that with different colours of yellow verging into orange, because that's kind of the colour when they start to get a bit older. As they're sort of getting drier, they do take on that darker colour. So they're my decorative ones, and as I said, the plan is to put those, the 4 around the top, and then in between them, where if you can see there's some that take on more of a sort of a pointing down angle, I'm planning to use these ones here. So I've got that little sweet one, this little sweet one, this little flower one, and these little ones here, which I'll probably have on an angle like that. Yes. So this one will be the base piece. I've got one that will sew together, and then these are the ones that I'm planning to have around the bottom, and they'll be sewn like this. So I'll keep those to the side, and this will be the 4th little one for the bottom piece. So I think we're probably ready to do the blanket stitch. I'm using this gorgeous vintage Mile and don't know what that middle, I don't know if it's Bryant or some other name, crochet cotton, colour 78, but it's on one of those beautiful old wooden spools. So rather than save it, and it's working beautifully, I have discovered with the blanket stitch you need quite a bit of thread to get all the way around, so I'll try and get round in one go. Now I do also, and we'll be bringing into this video the rest of the story, the first story in this book, of the adventures of Snugglepot and Cuddlepie. So I'll put that in a little bit of time. I'll just sort of get round this one, and I'll make sure I might, actually at the end, I might show you the pictures after I've finished reading the story. I will show you the pictures from it, depending how long it takes to put this all together. I'll work something out. I might take photos from the story and put them into the video. I thought I won't try and, like I did last time, I was reading while I was stitching, but I thought I might make it a bit easier for myself and pre-record the story and then cut it into the video. But I thought I'd chat to you first and then get into it. So what I'm going to do to start off with my blanket stitch is just bring my needle through from the middle, because I want to secrete the end of the thread between the pieces. So I'm just going to tuck that down. And then I'm going to go over equally at an equal point across from the front and bring my needle up from the back to the middle. Start to pull it through. As I say, I've given myself plenty of thread, and then I'm just going to hook that at the middle. And that's how I'm just going to start off my blanket stitch, so I get that nice little point in the middle. And then we're going to come through from the back, just spacing ourselves about the same spacing along and catching our needle. So putting a loop, I'll show you that again as we go. So putting the thread around the needle and then pulling it through. You can either go up or down, it doesn't really matter which way. This is probably just what I've found the easiest way to get it looking where I want on the piece that's going to be on the inside of the bowl. So I tried to get all different sort of designs, and then there's obviously different ones, some of the same ones on the back, but just cut in slightly different spots. And I've got a little package to go off to my friend Robin. She's the lovely friend that sent me that beautiful piece of fabric with a black Labrador on it, which I had a lovely time stitching into, and which will be going on my treasure hunt large blanket / quilt. So I wanted to send her, because I've been wanting to send her something, and she did say that she'd loved the story, Snugglepot and Cuddlepie, and so yeah, I wanted to pop some in the mail to her. But she did, yeah, she said she'd gone out to, or ordered a copy. So I think it sent May Gibbs out into the world, sharing the last video and my haphazard story reading while stitching. But I've really enjoyed falling back into the world myself as well. And yeah, definitely stay tuned for the ending of the story. For those that were a bit worried about some of the characters from last time, you might have some happy things, happy turnings out. Won't give anything away though. I have a very active imagination, but I don't remember being scared as a child from reading Snugglepot and Cuddlepie, so I suppose it's like many things. You need that little bit of adventure. So I'm using my large needle one so you can see it, but also just for me it works quite well with a thicker, this sort of crochet-like yarn. It works well to create a good hole for that to pass through. And don't worry at this point, like obviously I wasn't totally perfect when I was folding and creating my things. Don't worry if they don't line up exactly. With your stitches, you're going to find it all just sort of comes together. So just sort of keep lining up the sides as you go, and even if there's a bit of, I guess, extra bulk in the centre, it will look fine. You'll see what I mean. It's good to show you that it doesn't have to be perfect, so you don't panic if yours aren't absolutely exactly lining up. And that's where I think the blanket stitch helps as well. It's just sort of gives it that nice rustic edging, but holds the pieces together at the edges even, and then lets them sort of, just puff up a bit in the centre if they need to. but not sort of like in a noticeable way. So filming this Wednesday evening, we'll be getting to see the Roxy girls with their next video, so I don't think I'll probably put this out until at least until tomorrow, but it'll probably take a bit of time if I'm going to cut together audio into a video. Always takes a while to upload, more so than when I just do a straight through video. So we will see how we go. Time I didn't wrap my needle, but if you don't wrap your needle you can just pick up your little loop as you go anyway, so all is not lost. So as you can see here, I'm just going to sort of pull it so my little corners are lined up first of all. And at these little corners I sort of just drag it round to where I want it to sit. And as you can see, it's looking a little bit wonky there, but we're just going to keep lining it up as we go across here, and even if it gets a little bit of sort of creasing, we'll just stitch it where we want it to be, and trust me, it's going to work out perfectly. Well, perfectly imperfect, but it will work great for the bowl. I don't know if it just looked like my stand moved, but I don't think I actually knocked it, but maybe I breathed on it. Hopefully it's not that fragile. I was just watching Kate from the nest. She was working on her, or sharing her finished or nearly finished vessel. There's so many lovely folks to watch in our community. And my mate Annie Claxton, she was sharing a few days ago an amazing technique, Korean technique, bajagi. I think I'd seen K3N Catherine do that. But yeah, lovely. Just love all the different traditions of stitching. And sometimes it's really good when you can see someone just, kind of trying something out. It seems sometimes can seem a little bit less intimidating than watching an expert with it. But often it will sort of whet your taste that you want to then go and, investigate others using the method and learn about some of the tradition of the method too, which can be really good. So yeah, I'll soon get the story going. We'll just get around here and I'll start off the process of stitching, and then hopefully you'll be able to kind of watch and see. And if I need to, I suppose if I need to, oops, what have I done there? Haven't caught my loop. So I was able to just go back and pick up my loop. I mean, otherwise I could have unthreaded the stitch, but I didn't need to do that. I was able to just realise that it wasn't sitting where I needed and pick it up. I'm hoping the stitching together will be quite easy because I'll just be able to be catching these little edge stitches anyway, but we shall see. All experimental. Oops, didn't do that one catching it, but I can catch it after the fact. And we are almost around. Okay. And when I get round to the end, I just put one final stitch round to where I start, just so I get that continuous bit of thread that's sitting all the way around, just so it gives you that nice little edging. And if I want at that point, I can also just put a tiny stitch through the fabric and also then just do a knot like this, and then secrete that knot down into the piece. So I can pass my nice long needle out to the other side, pull through, pull the knot so that it secretes in, then pull it a little bit extra tight, and then that way when I trim it off it will spring back into the middle of the piece like that. And I'll just get this one to sit nicely, position nicely in the center. So this will be one of my bottom pieces here. So I'll just get us going on stitching together. Again, I'll get a nice big piece of thread to start, and I will. So I just had to pop off the camera to go and say goodnight to Travis and Alex, who were heading off to bed. Still, no, it's not that late, but I think, yeah, Alex is feeling weary. So these are the ones around the bottom. So the idea with the ones around the bottom is we're going to attach them on these edges. So I'll just start by attaching these two. That will be the inside of the bowl. So I'll probably just secrete a knot somewhere. Actually, I can probably come through, I think. See if I can secrete the knot inside. Just give it a little pull. Might need to take the tail off. So I'll secrete this tail there. And so I'm just wondering, do we... So my idea was that I'll just be able to kind of take my needle and stitch, pick up the threads on both bits of the blanket stitch, and won't necessarily have to go through the fabric. So let's see how this works. So almost just like binding the thread, really. So we'll see how that looks once we've done this first piece. I might just go through the fabric at the top. So I think that is going to work fine, because all it has to do is hold the pieces together. It has to be strong enough, but I think that's actually kind of nice. And just having them, I'm thinking of those little like tree ants. We have green tree ants that build little nests in the trees out of, not here in Victoria, but in some of the more tropical areas, that build little nests out of the leaves, all sort of woven together and sort of stuck together almost like this. So I think that is going to be a beautiful little finish. I really like how it looks along the seams. It's almost like a bit of weaving. So my plan will be to continue to do that. I'm thinking that rather than tying it off on each of these, I'll actually just pass it around through the fabric. So I'll just sort of put my needle in, and this is again where the long needle will come in handy, and I will sort of pop it out like this, for example, and then just pop it back in and pass it over to the next place where I need to join, and pop it out at the other end. Okay, and so the main thing that I need to remember is that I need to keep putting it flat on the table and seeing where the square is. So I won't be sewing this edge, for example. I need to actually come down from here down to this spot down here. So I will cut in the story now of the first of the complete adventures of Snugglepot and Cuddlepie, picking up where we left off the story last time. So enjoy.
So we finished last time with Snugglepot and Cuddlepie falling asleep in the lacy shadow of a boronia bush. So they woke to the sound of gay music. A band was playing quite near. Birds were singing, frogs croaking, cicadas, crickets, bees, and a little brook. All were in the band. It was a ragtime band, and Snugglepot and Cuddlepie grew restless. They heard voices. "They are inside this wall," said Cuddlepie. "Here's a crack. Let's look in." So they peeped, and there they saw a jolly party, all dancing very hard as if they were in a great hurry but had nowhere to go. Quite near to them, Snugglepot and Cuddlepie saw a poor little blossom sitting all alone. Her dress was torn, and she was very dirty and sad. Nobody danced with her. "I'll get in," said Snugglepot, and asked her to dance. So he crawled through the crack when no one was looking and asked the little blossom to dance with him. The little girl was so pleased. Now Snugglepot couldn't dance, and the little girl couldn't dance, so they got in everybody's way, and everybody looked crossly at them. Then they heard someone say, "What a dirty little blossom, and the nut has no clothes on. They ought not to be allowed in." Snugglepot was filled with pity for the poor little girl. "I'm sorry I've no clothes," he said. "Where I come from, they don't wear any." "That doesn't matter," said little ragged blossom. "It's better to be a kind nut with no clothes than an unkind one all dressed up." "But I'd like to get some," said Snugglepot. "My uncle sells very cheap ones," said Ragged Blossom. "Shall I show you his shop?" "Yes, please," said Snugglepot. In his anxiety to buy clothes, he forgot all about poor Cuddlepie, and they went out of the dancing hall by another way. So Cuddlepie waited and waited and waited till he grew tired and fell asleep again. While he was asleep, he had a dream. He thought someone was calling him, so he got up and followed the voice, and he really did get up and walk along, though he was fast asleep all the time. "Cuddlepie, come here," the voice kept calling, and as it called, Cuddlepie followed, with eyes wide open, yet fast asleep, till by and by he came to a little stream. When his foot touched the water, he woke up. Help me," called a faint voice near him. "Where are you?" called Cuddlepie. "I'm here, help me," came the voice more faintly. Cuddlepie scrambled and pushed and tore his way through the sticks and leaves and ferns till he came to an open space at the foot of a big tree. Then he stood in horror. He saw a terrible thing. A great iron trap was there, chained to a stake, and tightly shut were in its great iron teeth, shut upon the arm of a poor grey possum. Tears were running down his face, and the big, gentle brown eyes looked at Cuddlepie in agony of pain. "Oh, poor dear possum, who did this to you?" asked Cuddlepie. "Humans," said the possum. "They set these traps at our very doors, and we run into them before we see them." Cuddlepie was too unhappy to speak. He went to the stream and brought back some water in his cap, but the possum was quite still and his eyes were shut. "Oh," said Cuddlepie in anguish. "Possum, dear possum, don't say you're dead." But the possum lay quite still. All this time, Snugglepot was in the uncle's shop trying on clothes. There were strings of them hanging up, and some spiders and grubs sat on a high place, hard at work making and mending. Snugglepot was very excited. "This is my first pair," he said. "You look fine," said the uncle. "They fit like a cocoon." So Snugglepot bought that suit and a nice walking stick also. When he came out looking so grand, little Ragged Blossom felt quite shy. She hid her face under her shabby hat and said, "I like the dance and I like you. I'm going home now," and ran away. Snugglepot was surprised. He couldn't say anything, and when at last he thought of running after her, she had disappeared. But little Ragged Blossom didn't go home. She had none to go to. She was just a little orphan. The bush creatures were kind to her, but she was nobody's business, and she had no one to love her. Suddenly Snugglepot remembered Cuddlepie. He thought he heard his voice calling in the distance. It was Cuddlepie. When he had seen the poor possum lying so still, he had grown frightened and shouted, "Help, help, help!" And he shouted louder and louder till Snugglepot heard him and cooed back and came hurrying to find him, while little Ragged Blossom, who was hiding, crept out and came after him. A lot of bush creatures were running in the same direction, and quite a crowd had gathered by the time Snugglepot reached the place. When Cuddlepie saw Snugglepot, he burst into tears and cried, "See! Oh, see what the humans have done!" Snugglepot was filled with grief, and tears ran down his cheeks, while all the bush creatures cried in their own way. Nothing could be done. No one was strong enough to open the great trap. The poor, gentle possum must stay there till he died. Now as everyone stood there weeping for pity, a great noise came sounding on the breeze. All the bush creatures turned pale. "Humans, humans," they cried, and scuttled away, tumbling over each other in their haste to hide. Snugglepot and Cuddlepie stood spellbound as the great noise came nearer. Then little Ragged Blossom ran to Snugglepot. "Come hide quickly," she cried, and led them up the possum track to a cave in the side of the tree. Just as they reached it, a monster dog came crashing through the bush and stood over the trap barking, while close behind him came a monster human. "Why, it looks like a giant nut," said Snugglepot, "and he's got eyes like ours." "Look, what's he doing?" whispered Cuddlepie. Oh, he's going to kill the poor possum." But no, the monster human opened the trap with his strong hands and gently lifted out the little possum. Then he bound up the poor broken leg, and they heard him say, "These rotten traps, I hate them." And he pulled up the stake and flung the trap into the stream. Then he said, "Come on," to the monster dog, and they both walked away through the bush. Snugglepot and Cuddlepie and Little Blossom were amazed. When all sounds of the monsters had died away, they hurried down to the possum. His eyes were open, and he gladly drank some water. Soon he was so much better that they helped him home. "Well," said Snugglepot, when they were last on the road again by themselves. Ragged Blossom had stayed to help Mr. Possum. "Well," he said, "we have seen a human." "Yes," said Cuddlepie. "And a kind one too," said Snugglepot. "I wish," said Cuddlepie, "that all humans were kind to bush creatures like that." As they went along, Cuddlepie noticed Snugglepot's new suit and stick. "Oh, Snugglepot," he explained, "what's the matter with you?" "I'm dressed," said Snugglepot. "Everybody does it here." "Oh," said Cuddlepie, quite bewildered. "Must I wear those fluffy things too?" "Of course, and we'll go and get them now," said Snugglepot. So they went back to the uncle's and bought a nice suit for Cuddlepie, and they both went strutting down the street, feeling most important. By this time it was getting dark, and all the glowworms were alight in the shop windows. As they were looking at the beautiful window of Cobweb & Co., a pretty girl passed them. Snugglepot was glad he had on his new clothes and walking stick. It was Lily-Pilly, the actress, with her favourite bulldog aunt. She looked at Snugglepot and Cuddlepie, and they looked at her. Cuddlepie said, "What a splendid bulldog," and then they all smiled and patted the bulldog. But the bulldog, who didn't like being patted by strangers, caught hold of the tail of Snugglepot's new suit and held on. Cuddlepie caught hold of the bulldog's tail and pulled, and Lily-Pilly caught Cuddlepie round the waist and she pulled. Then Snugglepot, to keep himself from falling, held onto a post. Then they all pulled, and the tail of Snugglepot's new suit tore, and everybody went down, just as Mr. Lizard came running round the corner. So they all fell against him and knocked him over, and he went rolling down the hill into Mrs. Busy Blossom's washing day, and there was a mess. As all this was happening, Lily-Pilly's father drove up. He was a fat sort of person who always ate too much and had a lot of money. He was so amused to see them all go down that he laughed till he cried and said, "I'll have that in my new picture play, and you must be the actors." He shook hands with Snugglepot and Cuddlepie and gave them tickets for the picture show. Then he drove away, taking Lily-Pilly and the bulldog with him. He didn't look quite the right shape to be the father of Lily-Pilly, but it's often so in life. Mr. Lizard wasn't really hurt, only a little upset. Snugglepot and Cuddlepie were so pleased to see him back, and they all went off to the uncle's shop to get Snugglepot's suit mended. When Mr. Pilly had handed the tickets to Snugglepot, he had dropped one, and little Ragged Blossom, coming along soon after, found it. She could hardly believe it was real and shouted with joy, so loudly that wicked Mrs. Snake, who had been following Mr. Lizard, crept out and was just in time to see her put the precious ticket in her hat. Mrs. Snake rustled her scales and flicked her tongue in glee as she slid along after little Ragged Blossom. It was quite dark now, and Blossom was hungry and tired, but she was happy, for she was going to the pictures at last. Mrs. Snake followed her all the way to a park and saw her wrap herself in a big leaf and curl up in the corner of an old seat. Just as dogs can smell all sorts of things that humans can't, So to the nuts and blossoms, even the smallest flower has its scent. Ragged Blossom slept on the broken seat because she liked the scent of the mauve orchid. When she was fast asleep, Mrs. Snake crept up and very slyly stole the ticket. Poor little Blossom woke up too late. She thought in her dream that someone was giving her a splendid new hat, and when she opened her eyes she saw the shining tail of Mrs. Snake slipping away among the ferns. She felt in her hat. The ticket was gone. Only just in time she remembered not to scream, for Ragged Blossom was a kind little girl and knew that some poor ladies were asleep on the next seat, and she didn't want to wake them. Hurrying through the ferns softly, she was in time to see Mrs. Snake disappearing into a hole. Blossom followed. It was very dark and she was afraid, but the ticket, she must get it. Presently she saw a light at the end of the passage, and creeping up very carefully she listened. She heard the loud voices of Mrs. Snake's friends, the wicked Banksia men. One said, "They'll be at the lily-pilly pictures tomorrow. The lizard will be outside. We must steal the nuts and keep them till the lizard comes to look for them, and we'll only give them up in exchange for him." "Aha," said Mrs. Snake's voice. "That'll get him. The monster, how I hate him." "We'll starve those fat nuts," said one angry voice. "Do him good," said another horrible voice. "And we'll kill the ugly lizard they're so fond of," said Mrs. Snake's awful voice. When Blossom heard these terrible things, her hair stood up straight with fright. It was very cold in the passage, and before she could stop it, Blossom sneezed. Mrs. Snake darted to the door and was so astonished to see Blossom that she stood still, staring. Little Blossom sank trembling to the ground, her hands in the dust. Suddenly she thought of something. Like a flash, she dashed 2 handfuls of dust into Mrs. Snake's eyes, then jumped up and ran. It was uphill, but she ran. She was breathless, but she ran and ran. Her knees were giving way, but she still ran. She could hear them coming. Faster she ran, until at last she came to the top and fell out upon the moss. They were coming. They were close behind. Blossom had just enough strength to crawl under a dead gum leaf and lie there as still as the moss. Several Banksia men came hurrying out of the hole. "She's not out here," said one. "She must have hidden in the passage," said another. "Perhaps she's under that leaf," said a third. Blossom nearly jumped, but held her breath. "What was that?" said one. "It's Mrs. Snake. She must have found her. Come on." Then they all went in again, and Blossom heard them running and shouting down under the ground. Worn out with excitement and running, little Blossom sank into a long sleep. She was awakened by the heavy tread of a big grey possum on his rounds. They are the policemen at night because they can see in the dark. "Shh, shh, what are you doing?" he asked, and Ragged Blossom told him everything. "I'll watch the door while you go and warn the nuts," said he. "I'd go with you, only it's getting light. I'll soon have to go to bed." "Yes, it is," said Blossom. "I can hear the ants talking round the aphis milk." So she hurried away. It was nearly sunrise by the time she reached the city. Already it was getting warm and the air was full of nice noises and sweet scents. The streets were crowded, busy. Ants were running about everywhere. Beetle carts were labouring along. Gay nuts and fresh blossoms were walking and chatting. Woodcutters were at work in the dark. Everyone seemed busy and happy. Poor little Blossom was worried and sad. Who would listen to her story? She was so little and ragged. She must do something all by herself. What could she do? She thought very hard, and soon a plan came to her. She looked into lots of backyards till she saw a long spiderweb clotheslined, and as it was not washing day, she borrowed it. Then she hurried along to the lily-pilly picture palace. Tears fell as she thought of her beautiful ticket, but she was not a crybaby, so she wiped away her tears and got to work. First she climbed right up onto the top of the high building. It took a long time. Then she made a hole in the roof and tied one end of the rope firmly to a beam. No one noticed her. She was only like a fly on the roof. It was terrible to have to wait so long, but at last the people came. From her high perch she watched them crowd in, and at last, looking through the hole in the roof, she saw Snugglepot and Cuddlepie. They were almost underneath her, near the wall. It was nearly time for the show to begin. Kind old Lizard was dozing out in the sun, and behind him, in the deep shadow, she could see the glistening wicked eyes of Mrs. Snake and the bushy heads of the Banksia men. Little Blossom longed to call Mr. Lizard and wake him, but she knew that would only warn the wicked ones, and then they would go away and make another plot, so she kept still and waited. Presently the lights went out, and now was the time. A wonderful picture was showing. It was the funny nut, and everyone was screaming with laughter. This was the very moment. Quickly she let down the rope till it hung just above the heads of Snugglepot and Cuddlepie. Then she slid down beside Snugglepot. "Hush," she whispered. "Please let me see the pictures instead of you. I've never seen any. Please do." Snugglepot and Cuddlepie were most astonished, but they had good bush manners, so Snugglepot only said, "Of course, you take my place and I'll go out." "No, let me," whispered Cuddlepie. "No, I will," answered Snugglepot, and he began to climb the rope. Cuddlepie followed to argue with him, and they went higher up and higher, still saying, "I want to go. No, I will." And all the time the people were shouting with laughter at the picture and didn't see or hear them. Little Ragged Blossom looked up. Snugglepot and Cuddlepie were safely out on the roof. She wanted to follow but was too frightened. Through the darkness she saw the wicked eyes of a Banksia man looking at her. Then something dashed in, grabbed her by the legs, dragged her out of the seat, hoisted her over the heads of the people and out of the picture show, all in a moment, faster than it can be told. A hand was over her mouth so she couldn't scream. She was carried along at a great speed. Then she heard shouting and a great noise of people racing after them. Stop them, they were calling. At last they came to a steep hill. "Throw her down," hissed Mrs. Snake. "Not me," panted the angry Banksia man. Then quite suddenly they all seemed to fall down a big hole, and they rolled and rolled till they came to the bottom and lay there panting. "Thank goodness we're home," said Mrs. Snake as soon as she got her breath again. "Tie her up and come and get something to drink." But Little Blossom couldn't run now. She lay quite still and cold. "Never mind, she's dead," said a Banksia man. "We'll get in trouble if she is," said another. "Pooh, she's only a little stray, no one will miss her." And so saying, Mrs. Snake and the wicked Banksia men went away. It was late in the afternoon, and Snugglepot and Cuddlepie and Mr. Lizard were chewing wattle gum and resting by the roadside. "How did you get up there on the roof?" asked Mr. Lizard. Snugglepot told him. "Why," explained Mr. Lizard, "she must have known the plot and was trying to save you." "Poor kind Little Blossom," said Snugglepot. "If only we could find her." "Let's ask this tramp if he's seen them," said Cuddlepie, as a tramp came hobbling along the road. "Well, yes," he said, rubbing his bushy beard. "I seen some nasty-looking folk running away with a little girl. They went in that direction. I heard 'em say they was gonna go to the gummin." "The gummin," shouted Mr. Lizard. "Jump on, we'll soon have them." As they galloped away, the old tramp threw back his head and laughed. He wasn't a tramp at all, but one of the wicked Banksia men disguised in a paperbark cloak. He hurried back to Mrs. Snake. "It's all right," he said. "I've sent them to the gum-in. If we hurry by the underground passage, we'll get there first." "Good man," said Mrs. Snake. Little Blossom, lying still, heard all that was said. "What shall we do with her?" asked the Banksia men. "Take her as far as the dungeon and throw her in. She's dead, or if not, she will soon be," said wicked Mrs. Snake. "Righto," said all the bad men. So they picked up Little Blossom and started off. Blossom pretended to be dead, and when they left her in the dungeon, lay still long enough, they had gone and their steps had died away. As she lay there, afraid to move, she heard a scratching noise quite near, and presently, in the dim light of the cave, she saw the earth and stones moving. Then a big hand came out of the earth, then another hand, then a face and two big eyes. "Who are you?" said the face. "I'm only Little Ragged Blossom," said the poor little thing. "Please don't kill me, please don't." "Are you a friend of Mrs. Snake?" asked the face. "No, I hate her," said Ragged Blossom, who was always truthful. "So do I," said the face, and then the earth and stones heaved, and out stepped a big frog. He was very thin and pale, and seemed weak. "Don't be afraid of me," he said kindly as he patted Blossom so gently that she burst into tears and told him all the story about Mrs. Snake trying to catch Snugglepot and Cuddlepie and how she meant to kill poor Mr. Lizard. When the frog heard this, he grew very angry. "Now is our chance to escape," he said. "They have left the door of the dungeon open. Come, I know the way to the river. Quick, I'll carry you." And the big frog carried little Blossom till they came to a cave with a lake in it. "Shut your eyes and hold on to me and don't be afraid," said the frog, and then he dived into the water and swam under and came out in the diving pool. Mr. Frog clambered out and looked round. No one was about. "Come," he said, shaking the water off little Blossom. "Quickly, there's no time to lose." Just going to have a sip of tea. He hurried down the bed of the creek till they came to a big river. Here under the rushes lay a little boat. They jumped in. He pushed out into the stream and away they went, twirling and bobbing along with the current. After rushing down the stream at a great rate for some time, Mr. Frog guided the little boat into a quiet pool and pushed her onto the bank. "Where are we?" asked Blossom. "In the garden of the Gun Inn," he answered. "Come on, hurry or we shall be late," he cried, and as he spoke a loud shriek filled the air, then shouts and more shrieks. Mr. Frog turned pale, and Blossom's knees shook so she could scarcely run. All the time, as they hurried up through the garden, all they could hear was the terrible noise. "They must be killing," began Blossom. "Don't talk, hurry," said the frog, and he went so fast that she could scarcely keep him in sight. At the top of the garden was a little gateway leading into the road. They opened it and looked out. What they saw made them stand rooted to the spot with horror. There, in front of the inn, riding on the lizard, were Snugglepot and Cuddlepie. Mr. Lizard was reared up on his hind legs, and there, almost upon them, was the huge shining body of Mrs. Snake. Her head was raised to strike. But now a wonderful thing happened. High above Mrs. Snake swung the sign of the Gun Inn, and on it sat a nut painting it, who, seeing what was about to happen, sprang from the sign right upon the neck of Mrs. Snake, and with arms and legs about her throat held her fast. Her great tail whipped the road. Everyone screamed. The lizard dashed upon her and held her down. Snugglepot and Cuddlepie shouted to some men who all rushed upon her. More men came running down the road, and men from the inn. Mr. Frog came to himself and leapt upon her. With so many against her, Mrs. Snake saw that her end had come. She called, "Help, friends, help!" But the cowardly Banksia men had fled and were now far away. So Mrs. Snake was tied head and tail till she couldn't move, and her wicked head was knocked off. A great shout went up, for she was very wicked and deserved to die, and everyone was glad. Then Lily-Pilly's father asked everyone to a grand dinner at the Gun Inn, and just then Snugglepot and Cuddlepie saw the big, thin frog. "Why," they exclaimed, shaking his hands, "where have you come from?" "From inside that snake," said Mr. Frog. "When you left the dungeon and she swallowed me. But when she went to sleep, I scratched her throat and she coughed, so I jumped out and have lain hidden there ever since." Everyone thought this was the most wonderful story they had ever heard. "But where is the little girl?" said Mr. Frog. "What little girl?" asked Lily-Pilly. "The little ragged girl," said Mr. Frog, "who was with me just a moment ago." When Snugglepot and Cuddlepie heard this, they rushed out and found poor little Blossom, who was just turning away because she felt so dirty. "Why," said Lily-Pilly, who came hurrying after Snugglepot and Cuddlepie, "she's just the very one for Father's new picture play." Then she kissed little ragged Blossom and asked her to come to the great dinner. "I'll give you a new frock and you shall come with me and live in my home and be my little sister. I haven't any mother or sisters," said Lily-Pilly. Little ragged Blossom was too happy to speak. Mr. Pilly patted her kindly and gave everyone a ticket for Gun Blossom Ballet, which was to begin at his big theatre that very night. Everybody gave 3 cheers for Mr. Lily-Pilly, and some more cheers for Ragged Blossom. Then cheers for Snugglepot and Cuddlepie and Mr. Lizard, and then a lot more noise for themselves because they were so happy. Here is the end of this book. Snugglepot and Cuddlepie had many more adventures. I may tell you about them some day. And so then there's another story about little Ragged Blossom and some other stories, but we will draw it to a close there. So I hope you enjoyed that Snugglepot and Cuddlepie story. I'll now bring you back into the audio of the video itself as we finish off the bowl.
Any of these little sort of woven seams I haven't gone tight enough or put enough stitches in, it'll be very easy to add them after the fact. As long as I can secrete the sort of the knot tail inside, which will be quite easy to do too. And there we go, and there we go. Right, and then we need to take this down. Take this down, 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 down. Okay, on to this piece here. Again, I'll just go through the little corner bits of fabric and try not to stab myself, as I almost did there. I think there was a tiny little fleck of blood on one of the corners. I'm still sort of imagining in the future they might start bringing those of us that have left our stitching pieces and have those stitching pieces have survived with our little bits of DNA. Who knows? We might be brought back. We'll find ourselves in a gallery somewhere as a hologram or something. Who knows? They might be asking us, what's this long lost craft? This long lost craft or art that we are seeing. What was the purpose of it? And what will we say? We'll say the purpose was pure joy. We didn't do it because we needed a bowl. We did it because we wanted to stitch and we wanted to create and we wanted to share. We wanted to find the joy. And we found the joy. All those who say, yeah, why do we do this? Why do we rush into our craft rooms and why do we have such a lovely time in here? It's because it's fun. It's rewarding. It's for the joy. That's all I can say. I think Alex is often quite bemused by just how much I love stitching. He calls it my stitchy do. Mum's going to stitchy do, he tells Travis. So now I call it stitchy do too. Okay, and then we need to do this little piece. And then we have to work out how the bottom piece gets attached on. Yeah, we'll have definitely done some fast forward bits throughout just so that this doesn't go too long. But it's not too time consuming, this bowl. I mean, it takes a little bit to get the hexies done. Depends how much thread embroidery, thread painting you want to do on them. You don't obviously have to do any if you don't want to. It's going to be a beautiful bowl even without that, but the thread painting is just going to add a lovely extra little tactile dimension to the top of the bowl. You could obviously go full on and thread paint every single hexie, then it would take longer. I've still got another little vessel I want to make for this month, as well as finishing off my big vessel inspired by a poem. Okay, we are on to the final piece. It's going to work. I can see it. It's going to work. Which is exciting. Okay, let's do this piece side first. Again, we'll catch a bit of our fabric. Catch another bit of that down there. Okay, and up to the top, put a stitch through the fabrics, put an anchoring knot in. Oops, and we've created, sometimes do that when I tie a knot, don't I? Sometimes create myself a little problem. What have I done there? Oh, Christine. Okay, that's fixed. And we will take our needle down through the fabric, not outside the fabric, thank you. Do have to check on both sides that your needle is secreted in the fabric. Oops. Oh, come on, let's not ruin our thread. You can tell I'm getting excited to get it finished. I'm just wanting to rush on. Okay, and then final edge here, and then we just need to attach the bottom, which I must admit I haven't thought through exactly how it's going to happen, but it will happen. We shall work out a way. Where there is a will, there is a way. I do love how this brings those two bits of the middle of the blanket stitch together into a single seam, but it is also quite easy to be picking up a little bit of fabric every now and then just to sort of make it a bit more structurally sound. And here we are, and so I will tie us off here at the top and hopefully not make a knot that sticks out. Perfect. Happy with that, I think. And I just love that it is standing up all by itself. That's what I was hoping it would do. Now I've got to secrete this thread in. But yes, I do sound surprised because you just never know when you haven't tried something before and you are doing it for the first time. That's why it's fun. It's fly by your pants videoing. Fly by the seat of your pants. Okay, so this is our little bottom piece. Yeah, I think I was planning to have this little creature that's sort of hiding there. So I thought he could be at the very bottom, and so it will just sort of sit. I guess it could sit any angle, but I think like that would be fine. And so it's just going to be like a little sort of teacup on the bottom. Little saucer, I mean. So all I have to work out is how am I going to stitch that on. I guess I could just stitch it on and have some little stitches coming through to the base, I think. Let's see. Probably best to just show you rather than try and describe it because I'm not quite sure how to describe it and I have to see if it's going to work. But I think it is. So I'll just secrete my little tail somewhere in here first so that it's out of the way. Pop him into there. Sorry, I've probably gone off camera as I try and get my little tail to just hide within. In you go. Maybe I'll just do a stitch over the top just to extra hide the tail. Okay. Now, doesn't really matter which way it goes. I just want to have this edge straight with one of these edges, I think, and have it about the same white area around. So, I guess I could actually, probably doesn't really matter. Probably doesn't have to be that precise. If I do it from this end, and maybe just bring, so I guess the square, sorry, I should do it where I can see it. Maybe what I can actually do is draw the square from here onto the bottom piece here if I think I need it, which I don't know. So this is with my friction marker, so I'll be able to erase it with heat. See, that's not quite square, is it? So maybe I need to make it a bit more like that. Something like that. Okay, let's give that a go, which means that, as I say, it doesn't matter where I come through. That looks a pretty even spacing around, as best as one can space it. And then I wonder if I can just then pop through at the next corner. Just trying this out to see if it will work. So I've popped in at that corner, and then if I just pop back through at that corner, it is that challenge of getting caught on your own container. So if I then come up to about there and then pop through at this corner, I think it's going to be pretty forgiving, so I don't think I have to be like 100% precise. Ouch, just poked myself. I'll probably get some more DNA at some point on this. And then go over to the next part of the square-ish shape. I'm sure you could be more precise, and if that's important to you, definitely do that. You do you. I'm doing my slightly bodgy me, and that's okay with me. So I'm just coming back sort of through around the same point, but not exactly, obviously, because otherwise you pull your thread through. And then I'll come down to my final bit and come through one more time. So I'm trying to catch a bit of fabric in the bottom when I do this. And really it doesn't need a full-on, like a fully stitchy all the way around base. I think it's going to kind of work just fine like that. So I think probably just, yeah, come through one more time through the fabric here. Back through to where my square is, pull it nice and tight, and just check that everything's kind of looking, it's sitting, it's not falling over, it's not wobbly, so it's got a solid base. It looks pretty even around the bottom. As I say, I'll be able to heat erase that marking with my hairdryer or iron. So I'll tie that off, and then I'll bring you up so you can sort of see it in full view, and then we'll contemplate what we could put in the bowl. So I'll be able to secrete this end just into the fabric. Put an extra bit tight, and then it will just jump back into the fabric. And then there is our bowl. So let me just bring you up. Close your eyes if you don't like being erased. Push the chair out, and there we go. There is our little, I think it reminds me of a flower. It's kind of got that little that little shape, and I just think it goes so well with Snugglepot and Cuddlepie. And so it's even got the beautiful designs on the outside, and then the lovely variety of designs on the inside with the beautiful blanket stitching. And that will be fabulous to put things like threads in. I feel like I should be putting green and yellow threads in. In fact, I've got some of my yellow threads over here in the drawer. Let's put some beautiful yellows in. Oops, we did make it fall over then because it wasn't balanced. So there we go. Beautiful little bowl to use on the desk. We've got our other little bowl that can hold all our little clips in it, and what a lovely little assortment. I am so pleased with that, and I hope that's given you an idea, and I hope you'll give it a go. Let me know in the comments if you will. Bye everyone, take care.